Hi, I'm Maggie Scrantom, and I worked as the production designer.
I'm Hilary Williams, and I was the assistant production designer.
So pre-production is getting the script breakdown from the assistant director, so we can know what props, what wardrobe, what sets we've got, what things might end up being CGI, what things might end up being unnecessary because they're going to ultimately be cut once we get to the final script, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sort of working through the specifics of what we need and then prioritizing how soon we need to start working on those things, because certain things you can purchase a week before, other things you need to order them online or whatever it is.
It's a lot of lists.
Yeah, it is.
And I think too that it's the logistics, right, of literally going through the script and going, this is what we need for each of these things, but then it's also artistically then making a decision together of like, and so then what does this thing look like and why, depending on our conversations with Corey and Jimmy and the like.
Yeah. So I think pre-production is a strong balance between practicalities and just pragmatism of like, what do we need to get and what do we need to make sure we have on set with us, and then balanced by creativity things. Some things are like, we need bananas, like you just get bananas, like that's basic. And then there are other things that are, oh, we have to create some sort of, like the cards that that Hilary designed, realizing, okay, what do we want those to look like? And then that will open up between a conversation between us and then a strong collaboration between what Jimmy and Corey were interested in doing with that moment. And so there are some things that are a strong creative ideas that we are gonna have, and then just sort of a, hey, is this cool? And then director, writer, producers are like, yes, good to go. Other things are more of stronger conversations with those people about what kind of looks or things they want.
So the idea behind this great thing that Corey came up with or had this idea for was these two different logos with just like a slight shift in some of the text on each of these business cards that are very important to the main character, Alex. So Alex interacting with these things can seem important in certain moments, and then yet like just off to the side, you'll kind of notice that slight shift of something being different. And so it really was this sort of basis of what logo paired with what other logo did we want to look at. And so it was this sort of mechanical thing with a human body that was more about yoga. And so I think I sent maybe 3 options to Corey, and Corey was like, this is it, good to go. Which is one of my favorite parts of what we got to do, was that collaboration type stuff and those little Easter eggs throughout the entirety of the movie.
Yeah. And then even just taking the time to figure out exactly the design of the cards and the color schemes and all of these different things, and keeping, and often it is a moment of keeping a lot of other broad scale things in our heads of what other color schemes are we going to have because of the location that we're at, or because of what kind of car are we going to be using, or what is the table going to look like, and so it's the storytelling along with what's going to work for the shot, and sort of trusting those things are going to work, but also trying to have as much forethought as possible for what will work in conjunction with other things. I feel like it would seem like, because of how much work it was flipping the apartment from what it looked like to what we wanted it to look like, but ultimately it was actually first day putting the sign up.
Absolutely.
Because those signs are awesome and they look really cool, and it's exactly the same reflection of the whole card thing, where there's like the dream version and then the real life version, and that the dream version is somehow like emptier and different and somehow, but I mean, that was definitely one of those moments where you're like, oh. Is this
should we talk about,
I was legitimately on set on these also. I'm gonna fail our first day. Oh no. So we had the 2 different signs because the one was blank, as we have them back here. So we have the blank one and then the one from Alex's actual life. Which was a really fun idea even. And that was one of those things, for example, we had our long list of props and things that we needed. And that was one we knew we needed to get done quickly, because we were gonna have to actually order signs from a sign company, which is now, again, as a production designer, you end up learning how to do very odd things, like that you can just order signs like that, and that you can order blank ones. They were probably like, this dumb girl, she like forgot to fill out her sign and we're gonna send it to her anyway. And I was like, nope, we wanted it that way.
This is what we wanted.
We went through a few different designs with Corey also. We've had some ideas of other words that could maybe be on there that were slightly off from the real world. But ultimately the blank one, there was just something really strange and empty about that.
And startling, if you notice it.
Yeah. And almost like his brain in his dream just forgot to fill in that part of it, which I thought was really interesting.
Yes. So the problem came in the location. We couldn't screw into the things because it was a metal door. There was also another sign already there, and that sign was actually quite a bit larger. So it was also like, how do we mask this thing? But how do we also make these signs look like they are legitimately put up so they would have a screw in them? And so it was, I mean, we made it work, I believe, with Velcro.
Yeah. We like, oh God, there were all sorts of things that were happening. It was, I think that is ultimately, even though it can be really scary, it's one of my favorite things about production design is the on-set moment of problem solving. Because I love that. I love puzzles.
Creative
so it felt
solving.
like an insane puzzle.
Yes.
I mean, we were like running up to different floors to see if there were other signs that somehow had like the color scheme that we need. I forget what we were doing, but we were like unscrewing other signs
flip
from like
it
other
around and then screw it back up and then put our sign on top of it just so that it looked like it could be realistically in that space.
Because that's another thing that's big for me is making sure, I mean, because once we had it up there with the Velcro, we still have the holes.
Yeah.
So it still needs to look like we had to like, we had to, I think, saw off, which we already had in our bag, but then figuring out how to get them in there because they weren't fitting how we wanted them to with all the other stuff behind them, but getting the screws that were half sawed off into the holes to make it look like this sign wasn't Velcroed on, looking like it was actually screwed onto the door.
Well, and part of our process as creative partners is to always think of everything intentionally. So it's not just as a designer of like, oh, make this look real. It's also with intention. So which was also sort of fascinating to get to work with that dream world with the signs and then the reality world. And again, to find like other moments within that we got to kind of, for lack of a better word, like exploit that as designers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately too is recognizing that this is a community process and it's a collaborative process, and you're building a team and a group of people who are going to be working with for multiple days and many hours, high stress, and ultimately that, in my opinion, always on set, stress is the enemy of creativity. And so even in those high stress moments, finding moments to be like, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. If we have to ask for extra time, we'll ask for extra time. If, if it doesn't quite work how we want it to, like, it's fine. We'll figure, but we are gonna work until the last second that we have to make it work. But never letting fear, because you can't, I mean, we're all walking through life with fear all the time, but never let fear turn into any kind of like animosity or any kind of like anger or snippiness with each other or with other people. And so I think that's really big for us. So even though I know both of us were like sort of like, oh no, how are we gonna do this? It was just a lot of like, okay, let's figure this out together.
How about I try this?
And so, and that was great. And we asked that of the other production assistants to help us out and help us sort of problem solve some things, and ultimately we figured it out.
I think that I mentioned earlier this idea of the intention with which we work as creative individuals, and especially with the work that we do together, and that it is my favorite part of anything we have done together is how everything means something. And that is something that I love about this film. And that I have like my 3 favorite things that are just little nuggets in the background that I hope somebody catches, but if they don't, it makes me extremely proud to be a part of this project. That also we were given that creative license by Corey and Jimmy to be like, oh yeah, that's really interesting that his keys actually are the keys to his bike in his dream sequence. That we were allowed to kind of be like, what about this? And be told yes.
And because Jimmy gave us such a great idea, and then Corey wanted to stretch that, and then we were allowed to come in and stretch it more. And that we as creative, as in our particular creative department, that was asked of us, and we weren't stifled in that way from the beginning. It was asked, what else do you have? What else do you have? Because we know that like you have something else to offer here. And so I think that was definitely really exciting. And I think that's absolutely, I think it's part of our job is to do things that are interesting and exciting, but also to do things that are incredibly quotidian. I think that literally the point is to look like that's Michael's apartment. And it 100% looked nothing like that the day we got in there. Which we were in there the day before and completely flipped that apartment and made it look the way that it did. It looked very, very different. It had a very different style, a very different tone, color palette, and we came in and created something really, really different with it. And you watch it and it just looks like an apartment where someone lived, but that's the point. So no one has any idea how much thought and work we put into every little thing that we chose about, because we don't see Michael a lot, but we understand a lot about who he is because of the soothing colors, the workout stuff, the whether it's the quirky bits or the healthy things that we see. And so I think planting those seeds, and then also I think, yeah, it's absolutely possible that I think people will notice the cards because those are, we have really like hero shots of those moments. But with the sign, I think those are subconscious. And I think that if you're a storyteller, if you're a design person, if you just love movies, maybe pick up on that kind of stuff consciously. But I think everybody picks up on it back here somewhere. And then they really love a movie because it felt really interesting and had a lot of layers, but maybe they couldn't speak to why. But that would be one of the reasons why, even if they didn't know why.
My 3 favorite nuggets that exist in the movie are the sign is one, the car keys to the flip to the bike key. And there is a tiny little bike in the background of one of the scenes that is flipped over. And I just love that it sort
of
gives
in the kitchen?
I can't
remember
I think it's
either.
in the bathroom.
Okay. Yeah.
But I just love that there are these pieces of the script that live throughout all of the production design. And just like you were saying before, Maggie, of even if no one actually picks it out and literally says it, it's still there. And you still like the uneasiness that lives in that script is in those signs. And I love that.
I think it's a really great point. I think it's, in the sense of the proudest moment, I think it's typically for me, proudest moments have to do with sort of like overarching high level things and with people and attitude. And I think that is my proudest moment, is how we work together and then how we work together in conjunction with Corey and Jimmy. The things they asked of us and we were like, yeah, we will get it done. Or the things we asked of them, can we try this? What do you think about this? And that they were open to those things. I think that is absolutely the proudest thing for me. It's even just being in that apartment together was so much fun. I guess some people could say if they like looked at the schedule and all the work that we had to do, they might say, wow, that sounds stressful. And I'm like, it wasn't really. Like we created a really thoughtful schedule for ourselves and we gave ourselves enough time and we had a lot of fun thinking about again, even just the artwork hanging in the bathroom. When you said that, it reminded me of the antler guy in the bathroom, and we had a lot of different options for that wall, and we settled on that one. And even that, again, I don't think either of us had a reason for that, but because we had done so much other intentional, conscious, thoughtful design, at that point, you know that somewhere in your gut, you know what you need to do with those moments. And so you can just be like, this feels right. And maybe one day we can be like, oh, that probably felt right because it connected back to this thing and that storytelling thing and this color scheme. But in the moment, we were just able to be like, this is the right one together. And I think those moments are always really exciting. I just think collaboration is a magical thing. But why short films are important, I think, can go both ways for the people watching them and for the people making them. I think there are certain stories that are there are short stories versus novels, and I think that's for a reason. There are certain stories that are just make more sense in these kind of small ways. And we have so many different ways that we tell stories now. You can read a tweet and the way that it like lays something out is a story. And it wouldn't work any other way except for as a tweet. And I think that just recognizing all of the different ways that we tell stories now, and I think short films have just as much of a value and an importance in how you communicate an idea and tell an important virtue or moral or ask a question or however it is. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it allows for a very specific kind of creative process that also allows people to get better at their job.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important.
Absolutely.
And it's a really great way to consume something in the same way that you're talking about with like Twitter. Some stuff it's a short story. And so you consume it as such. And then put all of those things together and suddenly someone has this body of work and then they go, oh wow, maybe I am interested in making a feature, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I really like this way of making art, and that's good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think in the sense of giving people an opportunity to get better at their jobs, and even just do what they love, whether they're planning to make a feature eventually or not. It's just an opportunity to do what you love and pour everything you can into it. I mean, we spent so many hours working on this, pre-production, during the shoot, all of it, and we were able to actually give our full selves to it because it was a smaller project. Because at the same time, we have our other multiple jobs that we do and our lives and all of these other things. And so I think it's so exciting to have something smaller and be able to really give it everything you've got, rather than try to work outside of your resources and outside of your means. So I think short films are a really fantastic way to do what you love with a lot less risk and therefore a higher product. Production design, props, set, wardrobe, all of those things. So we're sort of in conversation with cinematographers, with even hair and makeup. So all of those things. Yeah. And sometimes, again, it's sort of like when we were talking about the process, sometimes it's really practical things of just making lists of what props do we need. And there's no particularly like creative license with what this is. And other times getting to decide what color scheme do you want for a certain character, what kind of person do you want. Like for Crystal's character, for Deborah, it was super fun to decide, okay, who is she really? And then when she's going to work, how does she dress? And how do we sort of see this as her work outfit, but we plant some seeds of the character that we decided she is on a normal day, on a day where she just gets to be herself. Because most people have that. Most people have how they would like to dress and then how they have to dress for work. So it was super fun to sort of build that character with her and with Corey and Jimmy, and sort of decide all of that stuff about her character, and then work with Crystal, the actress's closet, to sort of build a lot of that. So I think one of the big things is how production design also fills in a lot of those story gaps, because especially when you're reading a script, and a good script is going to find ways to have the dialogue, but also recognize that film is a visual medium, and so we're going to need to see things to tell us the story. So a lot of times there's a lot of chunks of stage directions that describe a lot of what's happening and what we're seeing, and so finding out as designers how that's going to translate to the screen is exciting, like with the signs or with the cards. Yeah, and to be able to collaborate again, as you talked about, Maggie, too, of like the magic of collaboration. And not every project that you come into do you get to say, oh my gosh, look at all these gifts I was given as a designer, that I can give this idea or take an idea from somebody else and go, great, I can do that. And it feels really good to collaborate in that way and have that kind of investment in a project. And I do believe that even when props are simple, that they are meant to tell a story. And that's the best of people who production design. That's what they're doing every single time. However, it is pretty fun to get to do a script where you get to just add on and add on and add on and be told yes, yes, yes by people like Corey and Jimmy. Absolutely. And I think even just with storytelling, I mean, we have with Michael's apartment, again, we don't see Michael a lot. We do see him doing yoga at the beginning, which definitely tells us something about his character, but we also knew that we built this whole character for him knowing that he had a really good steady job and then he has found a way to live a very harmonious life, and so we wanted that to be reflected in the design of his house, and also for us to see how invasive it is for him to have Alex there because of how sort of messy and disarrayed and without harmony Alex is. And so then to see how like thoughtfully set up Michael's house is, and then to see the coffee table full of things, and then to see Alex's room with all the different boxes, and they're all in disarray, and some of them are open, and he's like throwing shirts in them. And so clearly that's even just visually telling us that Alex has invaded Michael's home, and Michael's being a good friend, but it also tells us a lot about who Alex is as well. And we didn't have to do that with any lines. That's just visual storytelling. I also thought of one of my proud moments. Which actually has nothing to do with me. But my proud moments are like bringing people onto sets that I love and trust. And one of them is Megan Lane was on with us for the day that we shot at the hospital because you couldn't be there, or the doctor's office. And we were trying to solve, we needed to often, for especially indie films, you have to cover up branding and things like that. And so I was trying to figure out how do we cover the branding for this thing. And so I just sort of delegated, which is something I've learned to do. And I was like, solve this for me. And so we see this shot a lot of the time cards. And I was like, oh no, we have this huge brand that we need to cover up. I don't know. And I'm big on, I hate putting tape on things. So then it just looks like you put tape on it to cover it up. So I always want to find some sort of creative way to do that. And she came over and she had a Post-it note because I had used Post-it notes to cover something else earlier. And so she was like, had the great idea of using a Post-it note again. And she wrote something brilliant, like wait for the click. So it just looks like someone was reminding the employees that this is an old machine and wait for the click. But it also was actually serving a purpose for us. And so there are so many things like that that kind of have this balance of storytelling, but also are serving a purpose for us doing indie film and covering things up. And so that was like a really fun, creative way. I think we did the same thing with the license plates.
Yeah, we like changed the numbers on them.
Yeah, we changed the numbers on the license plates with just tape, instead of having to get, like take all the license plates off or something, because that's illegal to have everybody's license plate on a screen like that. So yeah, so those are always really fun problem solving moments, but it's creative problem solving, which I find really exciting.